They called him worthless, a broken scrap of scales and wings. But one human woman refused to let him die forgotten in a cage. What began as pity became a bond that would set the stars alight. Join us on this journey and subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. The bazaar of Central Station pulsed with noise and neon, light the air thick with scent of oil, spice, and alien musk. Humans were scarce in this part of the galaxy, and the sight of one moving with determined steps through the crowded lanes drew a mix of curiosity and disdain. Illyra kept her gaze forward, ignoring the hisses and the muttered jokes in languages half understood. She had learned long ago that answering meant only more trouble. Her coat was worn, her boots scuffed, but her eyes held the steadiness of someone who had crossed too many star systems to be easily shaken. She had come for supplies, nothing more. Yet her feet slowed as the noise shifted ahead. A ring of aliens had gathered in one corner, shouting and laughing. At the center stood a low cage, battered metal bars, streaked with grime. Something huddled inside. The crowd taunted it, jeered, and pointed, as though it were a trick animal that had failed its performance. Illyra moved closer despite herself. The cage held a creature barely larger than a house cat, wings folded awkwardly against its sides. Its scales were dull gray, patched with bare scars. Its head drooped to the floor as if it lacked the strength to lift it. A mini-dragon. She had read of them in colony archives, though most reports dismissed them as unstable hybrids bred for novelty and then abandoned when they proved fragile. A vendor in a greasy tunic barked over the laughter. Worthless. Defective. Cannot fly. Eats more than it is worth. I should have thrown it into the furnace. Who wants it? A toy for your children, maybe. Or food for your beasts. The creature stirred faintly at the sound of the man's boots striking the cage. Its eyes cracked open slits of molten gold, dull by exhaustion. Illyra froze. There was no mistaking the flicker of awareness in that look. Not an animal. Not a toy. Something that still clung stubbornly to life. She heard herself speak before reason caught her. How much? The vendor turned, grinning with rotten teeth. For this trash. A handful of credits. Less than you waste on synth liquor. Take it if you like. I am tired of feeding the thing. The crowd erupted in laughter. A human buying garbage. Fitting. Illyra felt the heat of shame on her neck, but she did not step back. Her hand slipped to the worn pouch at her belt. Credits meant for part supplies food. She counted them in her head. Her ship was already failing. Taking this creature would be reckless. The dragon let cough a thin rasp like sand scraping stone. Its wings trembled once and stilled again. She placed the credits in the vendor's palm. His grin widened as he shoved the cage toward her. Waste of money, human. It will be dead by dawn. The laughter followed her through bazaar, but she kept her pace steady until the noise thinned and the lights dimmed behind her. Only then did she kneel by the cage and unfasten the lock. The creature made no move to escape. It only lifted its head enough to peer at her face. You are safe now, she whispered. Her voice was soft, but in the stillness of the alley, it seemed to carry. The dragonlet blinked once, twice, and shifted, as if testing the weight of her words. She reached inside carefully. The scales felt cool under her fingers, rough where scars broke the pattern. It did not resist as she drew it out, though its body shook with weakness. Cradling it against her chest, she realized how absurd the scene must look. A human woman carrying what others saw as trash, a broken-winged lizard barely alive. Yet something in the fragile warmth of its body pressed to hers, anchored her resolve. She named it without thinking. Tip. Short, sharp, a name easy to call. The creature's eyes flickered again, as though it understood. Back at her quarters, the station lights hummed through the thin walls. She set Tip on a folded blanket and studied him under the lamp glow. His wings were bent at odd angles, but not beyond repair. His ribs showed with every shallow breath. She prepared a dish of water broth, coaxing him to sip drop by drop. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then his tongue flicked. He swallowed. Illyra felt a surge of relief, so sharp it almost hurt. Tip curled into the blanket after the small meal, his body twitching, as if dreams had already taken him. She watched the rise and fall of his chest, thinking of the credits gone to parts. She would not by the hunger she might feel in the days to come. Logic told her she had been a fool. Compassion had spoken louder. In the dim light, Tip gave a faint chirr, a sound so soft she thought she had imagined it. his eyes half open, glimmering weak gold. For the first time, she saw not just survival in them, but a quiet plea of question. She leaned closer. "I will not give up on you." The words surprised her as much as they seemed to calm him. His eyes closed again, but his trembling eased. Outside, the colony pulsed with indifferent life. Deals struck hands, shaken, lives traded. Inside her small room, a fragile bond had formed, born of pity, perhaps, but already shifting into something heavier. Something that might demand more than she could yet imagine. She rested against the wall, arms folded, watching Tip sleep. Tomorrow would bring problems, she knew. Food rations tight, repairs delayed, neighbors mocking. But tonight, there was only the sound of his breathing and the strange warmth it brought to her heart. The vendor had said worthless. The crowd had laughed. But in the quiet, Alara felt certainty settle like gravity. She had not bought trash. She had chosen life. Tip stirred, once more stretching a bent wing and settling deeper into the blanket. His tiny claws twitched as if grasping for flight in dreams. Alara smiled faintly, though her eyes burned with weariness. The night stretched on silent, except for the hum of the station and the whisper of possibility pressing against the walls. She could not see the path ahead, but she knew this fragile creature was now entwined with her fate. And somewhere deep inside the weakness of its body, she sensed a strength waiting, a spark no jeer, no cage, no careless hand had managed to extinguish. She closed her eyes beside him, letting that knowledge carry her into restless sleep. Tomorrow would test them both. Morning on Sindel Station came not with sunlight, but with the grinding pulse of machinery and the hiss of recycled air. Alara rose stiffly from the floor, her joints aching from the cold. Her first thought was of the bundle on the blanket. Tip. He was still breathing. The rise and fall of his small chest was steadier than it had been in the night. His eyes opened slowly, and for the first time she saw them catch the lamplight, not dull, but faintly bright like embers hidden in ash. She whispered softly, "Good morning, Tip." He made a faint sound between a chirp and a sigh. His wings shifted awkwardly against the blanket. The next hours blurred into careful tasks. She crushed nutrient packs, diluted them into broth, coaxed him to drink. At first, every swallow seemed to battle, but each day the effort grew less painful. His ribs remained sharp beneath the skin, but strength returned drop by drop. Alara cleaned his scales with a damp cloth careful over the scars. Sometimes he flinched at her touch, but never pulled away. His trust grew in fragile increments like the unfurling of a leaf after long drought. When she left for the market, she hid him beneath her coat. Neighbors smirked or muttered when they caught sight of the small shape against her chest. Waste of credits. Foolish human heart. She ignored them. Inside her quarters, Tip began exploring. He stumbled across the narrow floor, tripping over his wings, sniffing at corners. He discovered the glow bugs that slipped through vents and gave chase until he crashed headlong into the wall. Alara caught him, each time laughing despite herself. His eyes widened at the sound, as though laughter were something he had never heard before. One evening he attempted to climb onto the cot. His wings flared clumsy, and he tumbled back with a hiss. Alara lifted him onto the blanket beside her. He settled, immediately curling against her hip. Warmth seeped through the thin fabric of her clothes. For the first time in months, she slept without dreams of loss. Days turned to weeks. His body, thick in his scales, shed dull patches replaced by new plates glimmering faint silver. His wings, though bent, carried a restless energy. He stretched them often, testing their reach. One night, Alara heard him rustling near the wall. She turned in time to see him leap awkwardly from the crate. His wings caught air for the briefest instant before he crashed hard onto the floor. She rushed him, heart pounding. He lay still, eyes squeezed shut. Then he gasped and tried again to rise. "No, Tip," she whispered. "Not yet. You are not ready." But he growled low as if arguing. She knelt beside him, running her hand along his spine. The bones were fragile, the angles wrong. Yet in his gaze, she saw only determination. Alara knew the truth. If he tried to fly again in this state, he would break himself beyond repair. And yet if he never tried, he would remain bound to ground, mocked as worthless. That night she studied the scraps of alloy piled in her locker. She had meant them for ship repairs. But a different design took shape in her mind. For 3 nights she worked. Welding torch sparks filled the room. She shaped slender frames, curved joints, pat a harness. She cursed her clumsy tools and her lack of sleep, but the vision drove her. When at last she buckled the device on the tip, he squirmed impatient claws, scraping the floor. The frame supported his bent wings, spreading them wider. He gave a surprised chirr when the weight shifted off his spine. "Go on," she murmured. "Try." Tip leapt from the crate again. This time his wings caught air longer. He glided crookedly across the room and crashed into a pile of blankets. Ilara laughed, breathless with relief. He had flown, if only for a heartbeat. From then, each evening they trained. Tip grew bolder. He climbed higher, tested his wings longer. Each crash bruised him, but he rose again. His resilience astonished her. Word spread among the neighbors. Some watched with disdain. Others shook their heads. A few lingered curious. One merchant muttered as she passed, "Humans always pity the broken. It will die soon enough." Ilara did not answer. She returned to her quarters and held Tip close. He pressed his nose against her chin and huffed warm breath. "You are not broken," she whispered. "You are learning." Weeks later came the setback. Tip launched from the highest crate, determined to cross the room. For one glorious instant, he soared, wings straining against the harness. Then the frame snapped. He crashed violently into the wall. Ilara ran to him, dread choking her. Blood streaked his scales. His wing bent at a sickening angle. She thought he would not rise. But Tip pushed weakly to his feet, eyes blazing. He hissed defiance at the world itself. Tears blurred her sight as she lifted him gently. She worked through the night, binding the wound, repairing the harness stronger than before. Her hands shook with exhaustion, but she refused to let him slip away. By dawn, he slept fitfully in her lap. She stroked his head, whispering over and over, "You will fly. I promise." When he woke again days later, his strength was dimmed but not gone. The fire in his eyes remained. He stretched his wings gingerly against the new harness and gave a small chirp as if demanding another attempt. Ilara laughed through her tears. "You stubborn Puffball." Tip tilted his head at the word Puffball, as though recognizing a title rather than an insult. He chirped again, louder. In that sound she felt the bond deepen. No longer rescuer and rescued. Something closer. Companions. Partners. The station life outside her walls carried on indifferent. Smugglers bargained, thieves whispered, traitors laughed. But inside her quarters, a fragile miracle unfolded. A once worthless creature now claimed its place in the universe through sheer will and the belief of one human who refused to let go. Ilara knew greater trials waited. The station was not a safe place. Rumors carried quickly. Already she had caught strangers glancing too long and tipped their eyes, calculating. But for now she let the thought rest. For now she listened to his soft chirrs as he curled against her side. For now she allowed herself to believe that they had carved out a sliver of hope in the midst of steel and shadow. Tip's breathing slowed to the rhythm of sleep. Ilara leaned back against the wall, watching his chest rise and fall. She whispered into the silence, "One day you will soar, and when you do, the whole station will see what they called worthless." Outside, beyond the thin walls, the machinery groaned and the colony breathed. Inside, Tip dreamed of skies he had never seen. And Ilara knew with a certainty that tightened her chest that his dreams would not remain dreams forever. Whispers traveled quickly through Sindel Station, carried by smugglers and traders with eyes sharp for profit. A human woman had taken in a broken dragon. The words were spoken with laughter, but beneath the laughter was interest. Rare creatures fetched prices in distant markets, and if this one survived long enough to grow, it might become more valuable than any merchant's cargo. Ilara felt the stairs when she walked the corridors. She kept Tip hidden beneath her coat when she could, but he was growing larger, heavier, his wings stretching wider each week. His playful chirrs gave them away. She tried to quiet him with gentle touches, but Tip was too full of new energy to remain silent. One evening she returned to find her door scratched, the lock tampered with. Her heart froze. She rushed inside and found Tip crouched on the crate, hissing, his tiny chest puffed with fury. Nothing was missing, but the message was clear. Someone had tried to take him. That night, she could not sleep. She sat awake with a makeshift stun batten across her knees while Tip dozed beside her. She whispered promises to him, though her own fear gnawed at her resolve. "You are mine, Tip. No one will take you." Days passed with tension tightening around them. More strangers lingered near her door. A merchant approached her openly offering credits for the dragon. She refused without hesitation. His eyes hardened. Tip sensed her unease. His playful nature dimmed, replaced by restlessness. He paced the room, stretching his wings as though ready to fight shadows. His scales shimmered faintly, now silver, edging toward brightness. The attack came without warning. Ilara had just returned from the lower market's arms, full of ration packs, when the door burst inward. 3 figures pushed inside, masked and armed with stun rods. Tip shrieked, wings flaring. Ilara dropped the packs and swung the baton. The first blow caught her arm, numbing it to the shoulder. She staggered back, but struck again with desperate strength. One intruder fell, but the others surged forward. Tip hurled himself at them. His claws raked across armor, useless against the plating. A rod cracked against his side, and he tumbled with a cry that pierced Alara's chest. No, she screamed. She lunged at the attacker, but was struck down. Pain seared her ribs. She hit the floor, gasping. Through blurred vision, she saw Tip crawling, dragging himself toward her despite the blows raining down. Something broke inside him then. A sound erupted from his throat, deeper than any chirr she had heard before. His eyes blazed gold, fierce and alive. His wings snapped wide with strength that seemed impossible. The air vibrated with sudden heat. A burst of searing plasma erupted from his jaws, striking the intruders full force. They screamed, stumbling back as armor scorched and weapons melted in their hands. Tip rose higher, wings beating the air with sudden power. He lashed forward claws, striking with precision. For the first time, he flew not with clumsiness, but with furious grace. The attackers fled stumbling into the corridor, their laughter replaced by terror. Ilara dragged herself upright, pain slicing her side. She stared at Tip as he hovered trembling above the floor. The glow in his eyes dimmed, and he collapsed into her arms, panting. She held him close, tears streaking her cheeks. "You saved us," he chirred, weakly pressing his nose against her chin. His body shook with exhaustion, but his gaze remained bright. The neighbors had heard the screams. They crowded the corridor, murmuring in shock as they saw the scorched walls, the trembling human, the dragon curled in her arms. No one laughed now. One voice spoke in awe. It was supposed to be worthless. Ilara met their stares with fierce defiance. "He is mine. He is not worthless." Whispers spread again, but now they carried a different weight. The story of the Puffball dragon who breathed fire in defense of his humans spread through the market like wildfire. Some looked on with newfound respect, others with envy, and some with greed sharpened by fear. That night Ilara bound her wounds and cleaned Tip's scorched scales. He bore them with quiet endurance. She whispered to him as he drifted into uneasy sleep, "They will come again, Tip. But next time we will be ready." She leaned back against the wall, her eyes heavy, but her mind sharp with determination. The bond between them had been tested in fire, and it had held. Yet she knew this was only the beginning. The danger outside had grown larger. The colony had taken notice. And somewhere beyond the station, men who dealt in rare lives would already be planning their return. Tip stirred in his sleep, wings twitching as though remembering flight. His body glowed faintly in the lamplight's soft silver, turning brighter with each breath. Ilara laid a hand over his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She whispered again, "You are not broken. You are my miracle." And in the silence of the night, with danger pressing closer than ever, she felt the truth settle deep. They would face what came together. The station had not forgotten the night of fire. Days later, whispers still followed Ilara through the corridors. Some called her brave, others reckless. Many looked at Tip not with mockery, but with wariness. He had become something greater than they had imagined, and that made him dangerous in their eyes. Ilara repaired the broken harness and strengthened the door, but she knew locks and frames would not stop the ones who hunted rare creatures. She saw the shadows in the markets, the same men who had fled now watching from a distance with new weapons and harder eyes. Tip grew restless, as if sensing the storm approaching. His wings stretched stronger with each passing day. The shimmer of his scales brightened until silver seemed to bleed into pale gold. He no longer tripped on clumsy steps, but leapt gracefully from crate to cot gliding in short arcs across the room. His eyes followed her every move, filled with fierce devotion. One night, he refused to sleep. He paced near the door, ears twitching. Elara rested her hand on his head. "They will come," she whispered, "and when they do, we will stand together." The attack came at dawn. The door shuddered under heavy blows. Elara seized the bat in her ribs, still aching from the last fight. Tip crouched low, wings, half-spread claws, scraping the floor. The door burst inward, and 6 figures stormed inside, armored and armed. This time Elara did not retreat. She swung the baton, striking the first intruder across the jaw. Sparks flew as another raised a shock net, but Tip launched into the air, wings beating with a roar of determination. He spat a burst of searing plasma that engulfed the net in molten fire. The room lit with fierce glow. Chaos erupted. The attackers shouted curses, stumbling as heat rolled against the walls. Tip struck again, diving claws first into an armored chest plate, knocking the figure backward. Elara moved beside him, striking where she could, her movements fueled by resolve sharper than fear. One intruder lunged for her arm, seizing it tight. She cried out, but before the stun rod could fall, Tip rammed into the man, knocking him aside. His wings flared wide, the harness straining, but holding. His eyes blazed with fury as he unleashed another stream of burning energy across the floor, driving the attackers toward the door. But one remained calm. A leader with heavier armor stepped forward, raising a weapon unlike the rest. A charged rifle humming with lethal promise. He aimed at Tip. Elara threw herself in front of him. "No," she shouted. The shot fired. Energy seared through the air. In that instant, Tip surged upward with sudden power, his wings lifting him higher than ever before. The blast struck the wall, scorching steel. With a cry like thunder, Tip dove claws extended. The leader fired again, but Tip twisted midair, dodging with impossible grace. His jaws opened and fire poured forth, engulfing the weapon and the armor man alike. The rifle clattered to the ground, melted and useless. The leader staggered, his armor glowing red. He fled, stumbling after his men, who had already retreated down the corridor. Silence followed, broken only by Elara's ragged breaths. The air reeked of scorched metal. Tip hovered a moment longer, his wings beating steady and strong. Then he landed beside her, pressing his nose against her cheek. She dropped the baton and wrapped her arms around him, tears spilling down her face. "You flew," she whispered. "You truly flew." Tip chirred softly, his body warm against hers. The glow of his scales filled the small room, as if a fragment of sunrise had broken through the steel walls. The neighbors gathered again, staring with wide eyes. No one laughed now. Some bowed their heads in respect. Others whispered of miracles. A few looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Elara rose slowly, keeping her hand on Tip. She faced them with tired strength. "He is not worthless. He is proof that belief changes everything." For the first time, there was no mockery in their silence. Only awe. In the days that followed, the station authorities declared the smugglers exiled. New rules were spoken, quietly, rules about protecting rare life, not destroying it. Tip became a symbol whispered about in markets and taverns. Children leaned close to hear stories of the Puffball dragon, who defended his human with fire and wings. But in Elara's quarters, he was not a symbol. He was still Tip. The stubborn Puffball who chirped for food, who chased glowbugs with wild joy, who curled against her side at night with warmth like a small sun. One evening, she opened the hatch to the station roof. Tip padded beside her, wings twitching with restless energy. The sky above was not open, but filled with stars framed by the curve of the orbital ring. For a long moment, they stood together, gazing at the endless stretch. Elara smiled faintly. "One day, we will leave this place. One day you will see real skies." Tip stretched his wings wide. He leapt into the air, beating them with powerful rhythm. For the first time, he soared not just across the room, but high above the roof, circling in the open air. His body gleamed silver and gold against the black of space. Elara laughed through her tears as she watched him. They had called him broken, worthless trash. But he had become her miracle, her companion, her protector, her joy. When he landed again, he pressed against her chest of scales, still warm from flight. She whispered into the night. "They said you were nothing, but you were everything." Tip chirred, softly nuzzling her neck. His eyes glowed with fierce love. Together, they stood beneath the stars. The world had tested them, tried to tear them apart. Instead, it had forged them into something unbreakable. And as the hum of the station faded into silence, Alara knew with absolute certainty that whatever lay ahead, they would face it side by side,